So welcome to another B0 contributor hours. Today we have one item in the agenda submitted by PoktBlade himself. Why don't you take it away, PoktBlade?
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of forgot the agenda item I submitted, but I think it was along the lines of, I think the first question was, what is the significance of the 21 unstaken time? Um, what was like the considerations when it came to 21 days?
So 21 days is mostly a buffer of time to where basically what we considered was what was an amount of time that was short enough but long enough so that there wouldn't be too many sudden movements in the system. It was from an economicalist point of view, and I'm not the economics expert here. It was a way to deter and to avoid like the constant, let's say, the understanding that the opportunity cost of staking your tokens wasn't only the money you were staking, but the time frame that you're staking them in. And also it was fast enough to make changes within the span of 30 days. That was the thing. From a mechanism standpoint, it was a way for us to be like, hey, we want to incentivize validators and servicers to stay to keep their service up as much as possible, so we could fulfill an SLA uh, of quality for our applications, right? So that was basically why 21 days was selected. If you notice, it's shy away from 30 days. In a week is 3/4 of a month, basically. Sorry, not a week, a month. Um, so yeah, there's that, but the number itself wasn't like what we wanted was something like, oh, you don't, like companies do their planning yearly or worst case every 6 months in order to save costs and things like that. So because this was a permissionless system, we knew tying up people for so long, where the rewards were dynamic based on the supply and demand. Doing something emulating what companies do was gonna be too long. So that's kind of the historical context.
So I understand like the history context. In terms of like the technical security aspects, is there like a significance between, let's say, 14 days and 21 days, if we could change it?
Um, I think the only thing you will have to take into consideration is how often changes happen in the network and how that could impact that create more frequent periods of spikes in terms of like uh, transaction spikes and things like that. But it's more on the economical, the reasoning of the time frame. There's also the fact that um, yeah, I think if the change is in those, like I'm not I'm just this is just my personal opinion, but I think if the change is closer, both in on longer or shorter, closer to what it currently is versus doing something completely different, I think that technically speaking, that shouldn't bring too many problems.
Gotcha.
There's also the possibilities of long range attacks and things like that if you go too long. Uh, but that's something that it's more of a concern on the validator side than on the on the servicer side.
Gotcha. I see that Blockchain is like Milton and Milton himself. I'm not sure if he's trying to say something or he's just testing on his mic. But yeah, thank you so much for that answer, Louise. Um, moving forward, and this kind of ties into the 21 unstaking period as well, is that I'm considering a consensus proposal change on how what are the constraints on editing your stake. So right now, as part of like many proposals, there's this conception of a validator bidding war. Um, as we continue to raise our block proposer percentage and how much validators get for proposing a block, it creates this interesting flywheel of validators up in their stake, to a certain extent, right? But as well, it introduces this risk that you could be outbidded since the network currently only allows for 1,000 validators. Um, and what happens is, whenever they talk about this validator bidding war, is that, the bidding war can go up really high. And what happens if you're like the unlucky 1,001 um, top staked node, you wouldn't be a validator anymore, right? And you would have a lot of pocket kind of locked in into the network doing nothing. You can't, that extra pocket is going to be used for, generating block proposal rewards because you're no longer a validator, but at the same time, you can't separate them into servicers as well because it's locked in and you can't unstake for 21 days. So effectively, the node runner that gets outbidded kind of is penalized for 21 days and they have to unstake from the network completely, which means that they are removed as a servicer as well. So what I've been thinking in this like future potential consensus proposal is that servicers that are like overstaked by a certain amount can edit their stakes so that way they could get back that pocket. And it's bounded by the max bin proposed by PUP-21. And I just wanted to get like the course team perspective, like what are the implications of this? It's something that we talked about just a little bit in previous core contributor hours, but I think it's now going to be more prominent as more people continue to consolidate and more people try to secure that validator spot.
If I understand correctly, what you're saying that you want to propose is that if the servicer stake weight ceiling is 60,000 pot, and the smallest validator at the 1,000 spot is 100,000 pot, that means that there's a 40K difference there. If I'm the 1,000th validator, what you want to be able to do is move. You want to be able to move your stake up. If you want to compete with the validators that are in the higher spots, or you want to be able to on stake that difference between the number that makes you the least eligible validator and the servicer stake weight ceiling. Is that correct?
Yes, because effectively that difference between servicer ceiling and being a validator, that difference, that pocket is not being used really for anything, right? It's just going to be locked into the network. My proposal is that you could effectively unstake that amount or edit your stake to decrease it and bring it back into your account. The other consideration that I'm having about this proposal is that you can only do this if you've been outbidded. So if you're a current validator in the network, you can't unedit your stake. You can only do it if you're not a validator, but you're also a servicer with a stake amount of above 60K.
So keeping track of who was a validator when it's like, should it have some sort of cooldown? I think that will complicate the system more, to be 100% honest. I think what you want to be able to do is say, hey, you can, and this is from the top of my hat. We will have to go and revise the rules of why in 8.0 we decided not to allow people to downgrade their stake. Uh, um, so there's that component. But on the other end, I don't think tracking that you were outbidden as a requirement to be able to downgrade it. Because think about another scenario. Let's say that tomorrow the servicer stake weight ceiling gets downgraded from 60K to 30K. And you now have 30K doing nothing. So I think that this mechanism could be more generic. If you just say, hey, you can edit your stake as long as you can edit your stake down as long as it's higher than the servicer stake weight ceiling.
Gotcha. Yeah, these are the considerations that I want to, get on like a discussion thread so that way I could keep mental notes of them. The primary reason why I'm kind of looking towards this direction is that, right now the validator said, um, you almost have to be kind of insane or you have to have a lot of pocket to participate in this shenanigans of upping your stake to be part of the top 1,000, right? And you have to take that risk of being outbidded, and in the event that you do get outbidded, you get penalized significantly for that. Because then you have to unstake and wait 21 days. And so this kind of goes back into like operational, being efficient in terms of economic operations. Um, and it's just something that I feel like can be worked upon. Just want to prick your brain on it and see if it's like, okay, this is something that's at least technically feasible, and then go from there.
What I would recommend you is go look at the PIP-9, which had the RC 0.8.0. From my side, I think there's a reason that eludes me right now on why we didn't want it to go down. But that this was in a world where PIP-22 wasn't a thing. Now that we have a safe ground where people can do that, then I think the mechanism makes a little bit more sense as long as it's within those safe bounds. I also think that maybe this won't introduce uh, as much transaction bloat because you will unstake the total amount. You wouldn't unstake. These are transactions where the optimal number is already known. So you wouldn't unstake in batches. You will just unstake the amount all the way down to the bound. Uh, so there's that component. So I think it could be worth exploring. I think those two scenarios could be the motivation. If you ask me, it's like, oh, I get outbidded in the validator bidding war, or the DAO decides to decrease the servicer stake weight ceiling, uh, and now I will have a stake pocket that is literally not being effective in my node, so I would like to recoup that pocket, right? So for
And
example, in a scenario where inflation control goes too wide, and maybe it's a measurement to allow people to have more pockets, or I don't know. I really don't know what will the landscape of the network should look like for that to happen. But I believe that the mechanism is more generic if built that way. And it will be what you're proposing is an amendment to the current edit state, correct?
yeah, it will be an amendment to add the edit stake functionality. I've been looking inside the code a little bit to see the feasibility of it, and from my perspective, it looks like it's feasible as long as the DAO allows for it. Another point that I want to bring up on why I think like this functionality would be useful is like consider a validator that is outbidded, right? Their intention is not to exit the network, but rather get back that pocket so that way they could put it into some more servicers to empower the network. I would say that maybe that is a good majority of cases. Um, for them to actually, get back all that pocket, they have to unstake all their funds, right? Which means that one validator, also a servicer, is now also taken out of the network. Whereas in a world with edit stake functionality allowing you to go down, whenever you edit your stake, that validator is still inside the net. Sorry, that servicer is now still in the network, able to service relays, which gives us more power to the network.
Yeah, view it in the following way. I always say that Pocket is a social load balancer. What you're introducing with this, PIP-22 adds the vertical scaling of nodes. And what this change will do is allow for the horizontal scaling of nodes. Where if you lose your validator spot and you don't have enough to go into the bidding war, you might want to unstake the remainder, and the remainder might be enough for you to go in and stake another node. And now you are horizontally scaled or horizontally deployed, let's say. So that could be the framing upon which this could make sense. If there isn't a glaring security thing that we're not thinking about or looking at right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm most concerned about. Like, what are the security implications? I can't think of any on top of my head. I did start a thread on this, by the way. It's inside the governance Discord chat. So if anyone on this call wants to kind of contribute to that conversation, feel free to do so. I'll copy the link.
Yeah, I will recommend as well if you you might want to take it to the forum as well, uh, just to just to make it a more long form kind of thing. Once the ephemeral conversation is more settled.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
I was saying that you might want to take it to the forum as well, just to have more distribution channels for your idea.
Yeah, for sure. Just starting the early conversations, then I definitely want to take it to the forums.
Something that I'd like to jump in and maybe just in a discussion point get people thinking about is, if possible, when making changes that have impacts on the economics, to try to minimize the conditional logic that goes into them. And I only say that because looking at trying to predict out rewards looking forward, the problem is once you start introducing conditional choices, that prediction model ends up becoming chaotic because you have a nonlinear economic system. PIP-22 to some extent made the tokenomics of the network as a whole significantly more complex. And if there's a mechanism here where we can have this be a more generic operation without having to ask, okay, are these conditions met? If so, allow this choice. If not, don't allow it. Whenever it's possible to find that, I would encourage trying to look for it, is all.
Yeah, that's exactly why I mentioned the whole tracking if you were outbidded as a validator. Just to remove that conditional and make it clear, plain and simple based on network params, whether or not how much you're able to unstake, because that's the only conditional here that will be introduced given the new parameters is how much of the stake will you be able to get back. But that is a really good point, Joe.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I definitely agree as well. I think the only reason why I've kind of considered only allowing people who got outbidded to also edit their stake is because there are some validators in the network who have a significant amount of pocket kind of locked in. I think a couple of them maybe have like 500K to 100K, 500K to a million pocket staked, if I recall correctly. And if we were to allow them to unstake the difference, then that introduces a lot of liquid pocket to be potentially shoved into the economy, which is, there's no problem in that. But generally, I thought there should be like a 21-day waiting period for like other people to be able to react to that change. But outside of that, there's really no reason on, introducing more complexity on the potential new edit stake function. The only conditional that is really needed, and I like it a lot, is the max ceiling, because that provides like a baseline of like, what is the minimum amount of pocket that is required to keep our network in a secure spot.
A question I have real quick is, what would something like a transfer stake functionality look like, where you're not having to conditionally unstake a portion, but at any time you can transfer already staked pocket into another staked account in a non-time locked process, where if you're withdrawing it for liquid use, you're unstaking, you have to go through the waiting period, you have to give the market time to react to that token being unlocked. But what we're hoping to do here is to allow people to change their state configuration. Is that something that would be significantly harder than just changing the edit state command?
That's a good point. That's a really good point. It's like going back to my analogy of vertical scaling versus horizontal scaling. If you are able to just produce, but the problem is that you will change more. Like it will make it a more difficult implementation. So you will have to take a look at that. But it will be something like, especially when you do the transaction. Let's say it's a new type of transaction. When you do the transaction, you have to specify like a target address, and now that target address becomes a stake node. And because you can stand up a node, a full node, like a service, transform a full node into a service node, then what will happen is that when that full node gets the next block, it will just automatically become a service node, and now you will be able to horizontally scale your stake, basically.
Yeah, that's possible. Looking into creating a new transaction to transfer between stakes. That's a really good idea, actually. Uh, I'll be totally honest. I didn't even think of that idea. I haven't scoped it out to see like how hard it would be. Um, but no, that's a really good point.
Because here's the thing, Joe, you mentioned the time lock, but edit state doesn't have any time lock. Like in what I believe PoktBlade is suggesting is that you will get your tokens as balance accredited to the same account. So that way, and then you will have to see how non-custodial actually interacts with it, because do you get it to the output address or do you get it to the actual address? So that's another implication that just came up in my head. But the whole thing here is that those tokens will be available in circulation right away. Whereas, and that removes kind of the 21-day protection of, hey, these tokens are locked. It removes from the opportunity cost that people are paying when they're taking into the network. So I believe, if you ask me, that what will be best for the, like, talking about the network and the user in separate terms might not be the most correct, but what might be the best for the individual is have the optionality of the liquid tokens. But what might be best for the collective of the network is to only allow this node to be transferred to a different stake, uh, either a new stake or existing nodes, right? So in that particular scenario, that will be the two trade-offs of doing it one way or another.
Great summary. If there's one point I would add along with it is, of course, the engineering effort to do both sides, and adding that as like a point on which one should choose. These are all options on the table that could potentially be presented to the DAO, and we could make a collective decision.
Yeah, and I think there's a third option. The third option is that you do the three of them. But at that point, that it wouldn't have too much sense, because if you get the liquid tokens, of course, you can up the stake of an existing node or take a new node. So I think these two might be mutually exclusive. So more thought will be needed to determine what's the best course of action.
Sure. That's all the questions I have. Thank you guys for the thoughtful insights. This was really, really helpful.
Of course, man. Anytime. So that was the only item in the agenda. Now the floor is open. If anyone has any questions or comments regarding B0, now this space is for you.
PoktBlade takes all the time once again. Go figure. Woo.
That's cool. Okay, guys. If there are not any more questions or comments, then I think we can close out uh, the contributor hours. I have just one last comment that I wanted to leave for the end. The PR cutoff date for 9.1 was set to Monday, August the 15th. I believe the two PRs are already there. PoktBlade, the Lean Pocket PR, was already approved by me, and it's gonna be reviewed by the team as well for that double check. So the process is already in fruit. We will be announcing the future release windows for other things. Maybe this idea we just talked about in the coming weeks.
Oh, did you say 9.1 is August 15th?
The PR cutoff date.
Okay, PR cutoff date is August 15th.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's like that's the last day that will allow PRs to be merged, because after that we're gonna open the QA window for it.
Yep, and that QA window is at 7 days, right? If I recall correctly.
Yeah, it's a week.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming to another one of these. It's being recorded. It's gonna be uploaded for the rest of the community to watch. So I'll talk to you guys in the next one.